Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for February 9, 2015. We'll begin with the special order calendar, continued hearing items. Item number 1, 16494BZ, 84 Hugh Grant Circle, the Bronx. Adjournment?
This one is, yeah.
Your mic is not on, Madam Chair.
This one is adjourning. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm confused from other stuff. This one is adjourning for a submission date of February 24th, and I think a hearing on 3/10, but it might be the week after because we may be overbooked.
Item number 2, 76-12BZ, 148 Norfolk Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, so there was a submission on this, which I found extremely confusing. And I was so confused that I went back and I listened to the November 25th hearing video to check whether the requests that we made were clear, and they were as clear as day if you just listened. The comments were that the 4-story structure towers over the neighbors, and the instructions was to make it more like a 3-story structure by significantly setting back the attic and removing the house thing on top of it. The response was to move the attic back 4 feet and do nothing more. We were also asked to respond to the issue that this is a total demolition of the building and how this is an enlargement pursuant to 73-622. No mention of that. Also asked to revise the axonometric so that it would look like the project. This was also not accomplished. I don't understand this submission. I'm extremely frustrated here because I feel like it's extremely disrespectful to this body to make submissions that are not responsive. And so, I mean, I don't even see the point of having a hearing tomorrow, fix the drawings, make them do what they were supposed to do, and the other parts of the submission. Any other comments on this?
New cases, item number 3, 2557BZ, 22118 Merrick Boulevard, Queens.
Okay. This is a kind of an ancient modification of a variance from 1957 that was modified in 62 to permit extension of use group 16 manufacturing into an R3A zoning district. I'm interested in the zoning history, which might actually, I don't know, almost render this variance unnecessary. There was a comment that the area was rezoned to a C8 prior to being rezoned again, or it was zoned as a C8 prior to being rezoned to the current C23 R3A. I'm just curious whether that C8 actually covered the little portion of the site that's now in the R3A, because if it did, it essentially rendered all of the uses legal non-conforming, in which case you're kind of done. So maybe there was no historical data provided about the zoning district boundaries, so maybe that's me imagining that the C8 extended throughout the entirety of the site, but maybe not. So the proposal is to convert the use group 16 to a use group 6, which is, in the absence of a variance, would be allowed as of right. So basically, I don't have any substantive issues about it, but do have questions about the some of the issues in the application. The one question is, are the proposed 44 parking spaces as of right? I know that they're not required, but does that exceed any parking maximums for this location? And a question, as a result of the demolition of the building, will the site still be in need of lot coverage and rear yard waivers? I don't know, there's no information about where the waivers were addressed. So are they waivers that were in the R portion or waivers in the commercial portion? And the statement of facts sort of has an error or a misstatement. It states that the altered building is in the C23 and therefore not the subject of the BSA grant, but the sorry, but that the altar building is actually in both the C23 and the R3A, so it's one building. And what you should really do is clarify that the portion of the building that is going to be removed is largely sitting in the C23, and that the rest of the building, the entirety of the building that's in the R3A will continue. That's really not clear. Also, you should show, it's not clear for flea market use. It seems like there would be more signs than just that one sort of pylon sign. So signs should be shown on the building as well, if there's other signs besides that one pylon. And then my only other question is, what are the conditions adjacent to the residential district? For instance, what's the fencing? What does the rear of that building look like? The rear wall of the building? How is it affecting the residential property adjacent? Other comments?
Yeah, I had a couple of comments just concerning the original plot from the 1957 grant compared to now. There were some inconsistencies in the numbers between facts and findings and then what's actually on the plan and the lot numbers that are on the plan. I see now we have, lot 26, lot 22, and lot 37, but it's not clear whether those were the lots from the original grant, because there's a new building that was not there in 57 that seemed to be on that same zoning lot. So, and although it's as of right, I guess it complies, it was just unclear to me. Also, in their 57 drawings, they show that they have commercial from their property line on Merrick back 100 feet would be the commercial zone, and then from 100 feet backward, they've got residential. But it doesn't seem that the numbers are actually working out the same way. They say they have a 200-foot depth on their lot, on the entire plot, but that's not what the drawings actually say. So I'm wondering if the zoning lot has changed in any way, or when they were german new lots, tax lots, I'm not clear. So
You're talking about the drawing dimensions?
Yeah, if they could just sort of make that clearer. And also, this only accounts for 3 buildings on the lot and not 4. So if maybe they could just explain that. And then again, also what appropriate landscaping would be sufficient for now against the residential.
Okay.
Oh, I was just going to agree with you that it would be helpful to see photos of the rear to show the context and what that building looks like in the backyards of the other buildings. And also if they could give us the hours of operation, and could they be more specific about their signage, especially if they know what is actually going to be occupying these buildings.
Okay, so this use on this site actually works in coordination with the 2 other lots, Lot 26 and Lot 22. Lot 26 has a building and it also has the signage for the flea market. And Lot 22, which partially extends into the residential district, is used for truck parking and deliveries. So those 2 lots are not part of this application, but they're all part of the same use. So I was just wondering what's going to happen to those lots? Are those lots not going to be used anymore for this retail use? And if they are, the existing parking and receiving area on Lot 22, I question because it's partially in the residential district.
So in other words, how are they even doing that, even though it's not part of this application?
Right, it was not part of the original variance, but it seems that since that time they extended into other lots.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good. Appeals calendar, decision items. Item number 4, 3214A, 2560 Forest Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay. I don't think there were any additional comments on this, right? DOT responded we asked that they submit a letter and plans to DOT and provide the deeds to DOT as requested. But other than that, I know there was that Commissioner Montanez had issues with
Just
this.
that it's poor planning, but it's not the applicant's fault.
Okay.
It's DOT's fault.
Okay, so are we good with this otherwise? Okay.
Continued hearing items, item number 5, 300-08A, 3935 27th Street, Queens.
Okay. This is that incredibly plagued site that has been so mismanaged construction-wise that it's really bone-chilling in its mismanagement. The applicant submitted a statement from their, what are they really, their sort of construction management group that shows what it is that they're planning to do. And in response to some of our requests, they provided the 2008 DOB-approved plans, which would be the plans that are pursuant to which this extension of time to complete would be based. When I compare the 2008 plan to the 2013 plan, the most obvious difference is that the lobby area on the ground floor is significantly enlarged, and there's a parking space provided. And so without doing a lot of analysis, it's obvious that that's an increase in the floor area. But in fact, because this is a vested rights type of application, there is no right to increase the floor area. You're finished, you're done with because it's 2 times, I believe it's 2 times the floor area that's permitted in the district today. So already there's a non-compliance with the 2008 approval, and I don't know what else there is because it can't go inch by inch looking at the building. So the architect needs to do that. So we need the architect to show on the 2008 approved drawings all the changes made to the building since the rezoning, and any that are non-complying with today's zoning have to be removed. The CR Safety Group, and I note also that though DOB didn't actually issue violations on that, since the last hearing we had on 12/16, there have been 3 complaints of works going on in defiance of the stop work order. I hope that was just ghosts. The CR Safety Group, which they've engaged, provided a list of protocols that they are in the process of implementing to secure the site and ensure that it is being operated properly once construction starts, and to make corrections to adjacent properties. With respect to all those protocols, they're in process, so we'll wait here for the protocols to be completed before continuing on any kind of decision here, though we will want to hear updates. I note that the repairs to all of the adjoining properties, and there was submission, quite a lengthy one, from one of the neighbors about the extent of damage to her property as a result of this inept construction process. And so I note that repairs to all of those adjoining properties must be made in advance of going forward. And then these properties must be properly protected to avoid additional damage, which I assume CR Safety Group is going to be tasked with doing and is capable of doing. They included a copy of the contract with the CR Safety Group, and I noticed that many items that are possible for them to do or as part of their services were crossed off, as in, no, don't do that. And I note also that Interstate has been hired to manage the site. So I'm concerned about what was crossed off and whether those are services that must be performed, or whether there's someone else is performing them, because clearly the construction group that was handling it before has no idea how to do these things. So in terms of that, the the contracts that are initiated with these two groups will need to include full-time on-site safety managers and an on-site construction manager to quality control structural and exterior work. The list of services that was provided in the submission, there is a list of services, but it isn't clear whose scope that is. Is that interstate scope? In that scope, I note in terms of site observation, there are walkthroughs of the site. This is not a job where you need walkthroughs. This is a job where there has to be someone on site that is directing all of the subs on how to perform safely and code-compliant work. I'm very concerned about this site that has been allowed to do this. So I'm thinking that if this is approved to continue, that approval will be conditional on the applicant returning very soon to show updates on construction project progress, protection of adjoining property, and site management, because if we just let them go play in traffic, it could really be another car accident. Any other comments?
They did give us a revised statement of serious loss where they went into more detail about having to demo at least 50% of the site because it would be that FAR cap, and then quantifying what that loss would be in terms of the construction costs that were already expended on that.
I wanted to know what the significance was of OER terminating the contract with them, and what is the significance of that? Does that mean they don't have to clean up the site, or was the site already cleaned up? And why did OER terminate the contract?
I had that question too, because it was unclear why OER would terminate their contract. And then what does that mean to the site? Also, with their site safety plan, are they meeting regularly with DOB Vest Squad? Have they gotten an okay on their site safety plan yet from DOB? That I think that they need to follow through on that. And maybe I'm just dense, but I still don't understand how the elevator shaft on the new lot rises above the cap of the height for the district, for the M district. It rises 8 stories, right? So how does that happen on their new lot?
No, that's not dense. The questions before had to do with floor area. This one has to do with height.
This has to do with height.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, one second.
Let me know you're ready.
Okay.
Item number 6, 192 through 198 14A Winslow Place. Haven't received fire department.
Sorry?
I don't have fire department.
Don't have fire department?
Say that again, I can't hear
Fire
you.
department?
You don't have fire department?
No, they
No.
they made a statement,
They
but
made a
fire
statement.
department didn't comment on it.
Right. But so the fire department has said you have to come to us to get a waiver because it's not a 38-foot wide street, right? But the applicant submitted material saying, well, that's not consistent with fire code, that there's an exception in the fire code for fully sprinklered buildings, therefore allowing them to be at least 30 feet wide, which provides access to not more than 5 dwelling units, and the dwelling units are all sprinklered. So yes on the sprinklering, but I don't understand the 5 dwelling unit aspect. This is 8 dwelling units. So how does this work? And then there was also an analysis of how this is a record street and all of that stuff. I'd like to understand better how the applicant came to the conclusion that it's a record street as opposed to something else, whether that it matters that it's a record street as opposed to something else, as opposed to simply a mapped street or unmapped street.
Unmapped street.
So, yeah, very confusing, not sure that this qualifies for a waiver from, or let's say meets the exceptions.
I had a question, maybe the fire department could answer this, or the applicant, but I think it's a fire department question. I always thought it's a dead end, so I think somewhere in the fire code, there is a provision that if you're over a certain amount of linear feet on in your street, you've got to provide a turnaround for the truck. So I'm not sure, I think it's over 150 feet, and I think he's got over 150 feet of street. So if he could speak to that, and the fire department, if that's something that would interest them, I think they need to look at that too.
Okay. Anybody else?
No.
Okay, thanks.
New cases, item number 7, 14014A, 1016 East 13th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. So this is a common law vested right, application to complete construction. We have a letter from DOB stating that the permit was valid at the time that the zoning changed, and we have perforated plans dated March 17th, 2006. And there is material submitted that shows that foundations were complete, or close to complete, by the time of the zoning change. And I know they provided a construction contract for $1.9 million to show that that's the cost of the project, and against which you could, I suppose, measure the list of expenditures. But it's a funny construction contract because it excludes finishes, fixtures, and appliances, and not even sure whether the electrical allowance meets code because it tells you how many points they're going to install, and I don't actually understand how they just give you a points number and they don't tell you that it's code required points. So I'm not sure that even it's enough for electrical. The list of expenditures for the infrastructure essentially is $352,000, which was spent by the time the zoning changed. And that other than borings and surveys, expenditures up to March of 2005 are for demolition. I note that there are 2 architects on this job, and the first one was Robert Scarano, and who was terminated or something on March 23rd, 05. The fees for that architect are included in the expenditures, and then there's a new architect, so I'm not really sure what was the role of that first architect. Was that just involved in demolition, which I don't believe would go to the creation of the foundation, or did the new architect sort of assume Mr. Scarano's drawings? So that's a question. I'd like a photo of the current conditions, because there seems to be a parking lot based on, it's the appraisal report that shows the photograph. There's no photograph provided in the rest of the application. It seems as if the foundation's been backfilled and the lot's been paved over, and I see that it's functioning as a parking lot, so how's it doing that? That would be an illegal use. If it's a public parking lot, I don't see what it would be accessory to. The appraisal has a lot of problems with it, and I'm sure Commissioner Otley Brown will go into it in more detail, but these are my comments. The appraisal is incorrect with respect to the proposed use, since the ground floor unit was approved as a community facility, not commercial, so the analysis has to be redone in terms of that. The appraisal valuation of 8,000 square feet mixed-use building, with respect to that one, I'm not understanding the functional obsolescence argument. Shouldn't the analysis be the value of the 5,000 square feet of residential and the value of the 3,000 square foot commercial facility? The argument is that an 8,000 square foot building is really big here, therefore it's a functionally obsolete building typology. Makes no sense to me at all. So why isn't it 5,000 square feet of residential and the balance, the 3,000 of community facility? I'm also not understanding why option 4 was eliminated. The profile is the same as the proposed project, except with 7 smaller units, and perhaps that unit count should go down because these units are too small, so maybe there should be 6 units or 5 units or something. The proposed also abuts the existing adjacent commercial building, and there's a statement that makes no sense, that there's an external obsolescence because the building abuts an existing adjacent commercial building. Well, so does the proposed, not understanding that at all. With respect to the 1 or 2 family home, that was analyzed as if those two things are the same thing, that a 1 and a 2 family both sell the same way. That seems like there would be a big difference in value between a 5,000 square foot single-family home, which we observe here is very much desired, and a 2,500 square foot dwelling unit in a 2-family. So I think that has to be broken down. And then I'm not understanding why the proposed is looked at as a condo, whereas the other as-of-right scenarios are looked at as rentals and building sales. And why, and again, why aren't all of these affected by external obsolescence being adjacent to a commercial structure? Why aren't the condo sales being affected by external obsolescence? And then I just ask that a Schedule A should be provided that was filed with the approved plan, so we can really understand what was officially approved in terms of uses. Next comment?
Well, at first I had comments on the total expenditure figure, because they're saying $352,000 and change in the statement. However, if you add up checks, it only adds up to $316,000, and then you have a list of costs that actually have checks that aren't even included in the total expenditures, and then you have further revisions regarding the expenditures in the notice of comments that gives you a completely different number. So they need to reconcile all of their figures so they can settle it on one.
Notice of comments or statement of fact?
No, then
Oh.
they actually sent in a notice of comments that, that talked about because apparently the examiner or project manager sent in a statement saying, please clarify it, and so they responded with even another number, and none of the numbers match up. So that was that statement. As to the appraisal report with the serious loss, I found that needlessly complicated. I think that what we were trying to find out here is, what does the developer lose if they can't continue to construct the property under the previous zoning? And I didn't really feel that there was a need to go into an entire appraisal of every single type of option that you have out there. To me, it would have been a lot clearer if it was very simple, if it talked about the floor area ratio, the number of units, the type of unit mix, and the income you could get under the old, and then talk about what you could possibly get with the new zoning, and then just show us the difference, show us the loss, and that would clearly make the finding without all of this needless complications, because I fully agree with you. That report was very unclear and didn't make much sense.
I actually had a question about the building itself and the way it's designed. It appears to me that it's actually possibly 2 separate buildings. It's got a wall, maybe I'm getting this confused with another site, but I think so. It's got single elevator, 2 stairs. It's unclear whether or not they actually have 1 point of entry for their utilities. It looks like they may have 2, so I'm just wondering, was this intended to be 2 separate buildings? I think you can't share, if it's 2 separate buildings, you have to have 2 separate sets of utilities.
yes.
You can't share the utilities.
Right.
So, and I know this was self-certified, so and having seen this design before, I think they should take a look at it first, just to make sure that they can actually build this building.
Oh, so this is a familiar design
It's a familiar
typology?
design, at least to me.
Okay,
Having
yes.
experience in Brooklyn,
Yes.
I've seen this before. So I would just appreciate if the applicant to take a look, just to make sure they can build the building.
No hidden mezzanine.
Well, I don't know about the mezzanines, but, and it was unclear to me why option 4 could not work. I don't think they worked it through, and it appears that it might be able to work. Also, there seem to be some inconsistencies in the facts and findings where the applicant states that the owner didn't have enough money to complete and didn't have enough money to pay for fees like, BSA fees and lawyer fees, yet he presents us with a list of fees that I guess were paid, one of which was to the lawyer and one of which was a BSA filing fee. So if he's claiming that they didn't have enough money to do that in 2008,
To file in time.
To file in
Yeah.
time, tell us why they list that as a 2008 expense.
Commissioner Montanez?
No more comments.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
Sorry, lost my
Good.
Okay. Item number 8, 15314A, 200 Cambridge Avenue, Staten Island. It's a GCL 35 for school.
Okay. So this is essentially building a school on a very large site that already has a school adjacent to it. So the school complex takes up the entire block, and the other school building has an unimproved map street that actually functions as the driveway and parking area for the school. So this map street's already very much blocked by the other school use, which I understand is affiliated to this proposed school. There's a comment in the statement of facts that, or in the statement basically, that states that they're requesting bulk waivers pursuant to 72-01G for non-compliances resulting from construction in the bed of the map street, but they don't tell us what they are. The zoning sheet indicates there's a front yard issue, which seems clear because the building's actually sitting in the street, so that would be a front yard issue. But what other waivers do they need? We need to be specific, and they should be shown on the site plan. I note that in October, the fire department signed off conditionally, saying that the final plan must fully conform to fire code access requirements as indicated in drawing BSA 1 dated May 8th, 2014. And then there's a DEP conditional sign-off from December, which I won't read, but it's quite long, so the applicant has to comply with the requirements for that. Any other comments?
Right, they supposedly submitted a revised plan to DEP which showed a sewer easement, but that's not shown on our plan.
Right,
So we should have a copy of that.
right, okay. And anybody else? Okay,
Ready?
just one second. Okay.
Zoning calendar, decision items. Item number 9, 6513BZ, 123 Franklin Avenue, Brooklyn.
I don't know whether we have the DEP issues cleared up on this 123 Franklin. They are? Okay. Okay, so then, are there any other comments about this? And then, go ahead.
Item number 10, 18513BZ, 97 Franklin Avenue, Brooklyn.
And this one, we did receive, DEP reviewed the RAP and the CHASP as of the end of January and requested modifications, and we don't know whether those have been made. So the applicant should let us know. Okay, any other comment?
Are we going to defer it?
We might need to, I don't know if, yeah, we may need to defer this because we don't know what the status is of response to DEP comments. They have to submit? Well, okay. Did they submit? No, they haven't submitted, so we have to defer it because we haven't, well, let's see what happens. Okay.
Item number 11, 2614BZ, 45 East 75th Street, Manhattan. So you went to school?
Yep. I'm not sure exactly why we waited so long on this one, but I don't think there are any issues. Are there?
We closed it and we have to reopen it to accept
microphone's
the landmarks.
For the LPC? Oh. Did we receive the LPCs?
We did.
We did? Okay. Okay.
Item number 12, 14114 BZ, 2465 Broadway, Manhattan.
Okay, this one, we had asked for, oh no, that's a different one, sorry. Not that one. Okay, so I don't have any other comments on this. Anybody else?
Continued hearing items, item number 13, 24813 BZ, 1179 East 28th Street, Brooklyn.
So, this is another one where I was quite surprised by the response to the hearing. So again, when I saw the response, I listened to the hearing video to see whether I was crazy, that maybe nobody said anything about anything, but I heard the applicant say that it would respond to our comments, that it would check again with respect to the wall heights, but there is a difference between the 2003 side yard and the rear yard. Seems that the rear yard was built to 19'6" when it should have been 20, et cetera. So in response to the comment that the 22-foot long attic addition was awkward, and the revision is a 31-foot long occupiable attic addition flanked and topped by a much taller, really weirdly shaped roof line that overwhelms the structure. I'm not understanding how, based on the comments, that's what we see. So I don't remember whether the architect came to this hearing last time, but please bring the architect. I don't want to have conversations with lawyers about the design of buildings. Anybody else? That's it.
Item number 14, 26413 BZ, 257 West 17th Street, Manhattan.
Okay, so this is the ongoing brick CrossFit story. What we heard was that the court actually first ordered that the gym be closed pending resolution of the noise issues, and then we just heard that on appeal that injunction was lifted. So we need to talk tomorrow about the ongoing progress with the flooring and whether the testing has been done to determine what kind of a floor will be installed. We should have been getting submissions on, we're supposed to be getting progress submissions on this. I'm not really sure why we haven't been. Anybody else?
Item number 15, 32913 BZ, 145 Girard Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. This is actually the first time we're hearing this, even though it was supposed to be heard in November and December. Each of those times was adjourned. So this is an enlargement of a single-family home on quite a large lot. It's a 6,000 square foot lot to enlarge a two-story, two-family, needing a floor area increase that's kind of modest from 0.74 to 0.84 and a 1% lot coverage increase over the allowable. There is already a 27-foot existing rear yard, and there's no proposal to reduce that. But it sounds like this might be a legalization request also of not just a non-complying rear yard, but also the 0.74 FAR. That needs to be made clear. They're kind of sort of dance around the subject of legalization, but they don't actually come out and say it, that those structures that are added to the front and the rear, those kind of little boxes, were actually probably done without permits. But my comments are, this is already a very large house, but on a really large lot, and the proposal is to the proposed increase in the location of the additions is modest, and they're connected to these existing little boxes that may or may not have been built with permits. So because it maintains the deep yards all around, the height in concert with the neighbors, because there's no proposal to increase this, I'm actually okay with this application. What?
I had some questions because Well, first of all, they're not complying with the flood zone regulations, but they're using the flood zone base plane to measure height, which I question that, whether that is permitted. In addition to that, I looked at the survey and compared it to the plans, and I'm not sure that the numbers were transferred correctly. For example, on the survey, there's a 9.7 foot side yard, and it's translated onto the plans as 9 feet 7 inches. And the same has been done with the front yard and a lot of other dimensions. The dimensions of the existing building don't comply with the survey. So I'm just wondering why that has happened.
The dimensions of the existing buildings as shown on the plans prepared by the architect.
Does not agree with the survey.
But I notice a lot, because you see this on Sanborn maps, where Sanborn maps sometimes refer to distances as 94.3, and often architects read that as 94 foot 3 inches.
But it's not.
And it's not, and it's really a problem that the architectural community kind of can't do like the basic math stuff. But so, obviously, the dimensions on the drawings need to conform to the survey.
I just had a question about sort of those two little nodes. I think they need to explain it a little, at least clarify it for me exactly how they got there. But in principle, I don't have an issue with this project. My only question is, I didn't understand the significance of saying that those two nodes now are storage, like that.
Yeah,
sort of made them
interesting.
okay. So maybe they can revise that just a tad.
It's also a pretty weirdly laid out house, but that's not what we're being asked to look at. It is a two-family, but it seems like there's a sort of grandma's apartment or something on the ground floor that's very teeny.
Yeah.
She has to do her own cooking.
Well, it's grandma.
I'm fine if
Okay.
you're as modest as you do.
Okay. Okay, anybody else? That's it? Okay.
Item number 16, 4514BZ, 337 99th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. Sorry. So, look here on it. Oh, sorry. I'm not finding relevant notes here. Last submission was on 12/3. Is there I'm sorry, I'm a little lost on this one. I'm not finding additional notes that I have. The statement of facts needs to be amended and clarify, going from a legal floor area was .97 to 1.16, but these were notes from the January hearing.
They did clarify that. They clarified the deductions for the mechanicals in the garage. And they clarified that the request is 1.16. And
They gave us photos for the rear.
of the rear yard to show that there's other yards with structures in the rear yard, and noting that their enlargement into the rear yard is really only at the basement level.
Right, okay.
And
But
then they
what-
pull back to a 30-foot rear yard on the upper.
On the upper
On
floor.
the first
okay.
floor. But what
Okay.
wasn't clear was, I think to me, how high that basement level comes up to. Is it 8 feet?
I think it's
Above
at 9
grade?
feet.
9 feet,
9 feet
right.
above grade. Right.
And I think they also clarified the numbers for making the deductions for a two-car garage versus the one-car garage that they did in the previous ones.
Okay.
And they also, I think, changed their statement to note that it's a legalization
Right,
of the
which needed
two-family.
to be done. Okay. The rear of the discussion. Okay,
So I was okay with it.
okay. I think this is one where, again, I had technical problems. I saw nothing submitted. Okay. Okay. Any other? Yes, okay.
Item number 17, 5914BZ, 114-122 Jackson Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, this is a super complicated variance application.
So the issue is that, first of all, you need to establish that this is school-related, because we have a very large increase, and the difficulty with the site seems to be quite minimal, that I don't think would support such a large variance. So the first part of it is, what it would do is it would support kind of an additional hardship for a school to occupy, because what it does is it establishes that you, because of the water table, you can't build a cellar here. So the big issue is whether there's adequate nexus between the school activities, the kind of activities in this building, and how it links to public school system or other school systems, and whether that's really an educational function. The applicants provided letters from a number of the public schools. So for me, I'm getting much closer. Like, there were letters from, like 4 different public schools that talked about their various use of this place, many of which said they need to use it because they have no gym or an auditorium, so that's certainly justifying the gym. And one of them talked about an enrichment annex for after-school programs, so I do find that there's adequate linkage with the public school uses. And I mean, if we just think about how settlement houses have worked historically in the city, they really are an educational program. One of the problems that I do have with it is there's very little discussion in this entire submission, which was huge, on several things, but one of them was on this home health care program, which I can't tell if that is actually a not-for-profit organization or it's more like a visiting nurse services. It has all of these offices. It sounds like they have social workers or something who sit in the offices and work with older adults who might need help at home. They said about 150 home health workers, 150 to 200 home health aides per week. So that really is sounding to me like it's a business, and I need a lot more information on how that is programmatically tied to settlement and not isolated from it running as a business. And not sure where that fits into the deference and how you deal with that floor, which is, adding to the floor area and creating this larger building. I'm still struggling with how to fit that in, and I really do need to know that it's not a for-profit activity. I did have questions also. One of the things that we really needed is to understand what's going on in the building, like we do with all schools. What the schools do is they either have their architect who's a school specialist, or they have an outside consultant who's a school programming specialist. And what they do is they program every single space, and they say that between the hours of 7 and 8 in the morning, all of these rooms will be used in the following ways, and no room will be left empty because this is the programming. And here I know the programming is conjectural, but there was a schedule provided for the gym and something called ABCD. I don't know what the ABCDs are, but and it anticipated that the gym would be occupied in these kinds of ways, and that way you can see whether there's a need for the 8 classrooms that convert to 12, or maybe those could be reduced. Ditto for what goes on in the home health area where there's all of those offices. How do we know there need to be that many offices? So that's a really huge missing part of this application to support the need for that much space. How's it going to be used? How do we decide that the classrooms need to be as big as they are or whatever?
because classrooms are, of course, based on building code and school construction authority regulations, are limited to a certain number of people per square foot, and none of that was provided. And though it's great to get all those pieces of data from the school construction authority's regulations, unless it's tied together by a programmer, we don't know that it's needed in this location. With respect to the home care program, again, I note that there's no mention of it on the settlement website, so that makes me very nervous. Why? And I Googled it, I couldn't find anything about it. So with respect to the way that the rooftop gym play area is going to be used, they talk about use till 10 p.m. on Mondays through Saturdays with lighting and events and games and so on. I think that that's way too late for a residential neighborhood. Even if the lights are trained down towards the roof, that could be very annoying. So I think we should talk about the time, but I think it should be reduced to something like 8 o'clock. In terms of height of the building, it's very tall. We should talk about the floor-to-floor heights and what is really necessary to accomplish each of these uses. And then, sorry, one minute. So in terms of the scheduling, I'm looking at also whether things can be used to multifunction with partitions. There seems to be empty times when nobody's using anything. Why can't that reduce the number of rooms that are needed for the project? And then there was a very large submission from one of the neighbors that went into great detail about the school construction authority standards, one of which was particularly interesting to me had to do with the minimum size of a gym, which is 50 by 60 inches according to the school construction authority. And though the gym here is 60 feet, the outside dimensions of this building is 49'7", so they wouldn't achieve the 50, and I don't know whether that would have an effect on the Department of Ed's acceptance of the use of this gym by students. I'm sure there are other kinds of games you can play, but I'm not really sure. It's set up as a basketball court on the drawings. Is that the intended use, and will that mean that a lot of the schools won't be able to use it as planned because it doesn't meet minimum standards? Would you like?
Actually, I thought that this was a good submission, that it took us a little further in understanding the program, but I'm not entirely there like you aren't in terms of the nexus between the school use and the programmatic needs of the building. We have those letters that came from the public schools themselves showing an intent to use this space, but I'm not sure, and they could probably answer this tomorrow, whether or not the schools have the authority in and of themselves to make a determination as whether or not they want to contract in space in other buildings. So for me, I think that there needs to be a letter from Department of Education headquarters that states that this building would certainly be a building that they are going to plan on using, and that they do have the power to have those contracts made with these private entities. And I think that would then help me to complete that picture that this building will serve an educational function.
I have to agree with Commissioner Otley Brown. I saw that sort of as a letter of, if it's built, we'll try and use it, but not necessarily sort of a contractual obligation of, we're intending to use it for X amount of classes, and there are going to be teachers in the gym who are teaching us, basketball or doing something. It was not clear whether or not it would be sort of an official sort of use. And I also had a question about the sort of the social service aspect, and was wondering whether seniors came into the facility and this was support for them, or whether or not this was a social service agency that was going to be taking over space. And if that's the case, then they should give us information on the agency.
Same comments.
Okay, great, thank you.
Item number, next one? Item number 18, 12214BZ, 1318 East 28th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. So in the ongoing theme of confusion about submissions, this is again an enlargement of a house under 73-622, and I'm astonished yet again. So I listened again to the hearing on January 6th, and I'm curious that after all the comments that were made at that hearing and all the comments that were made at the prior hearing, there was no change whatsoever made to the extent of the rear yard extension or the addition at the roof. The submissions on the rear yard that were recently made, which include photographs, actually show how cramped the rear yard would be once this addition is built to the full height as proposed, and no effort was made at all to adjust the mass of the addition with respect to the roof, which is so incompatible with the attached neighbor. I don't understand what this is. The drawings were described as revised. I found like one little triangular, some kind of drain on the roof that was changed, and that was it. And I frankly find this, again, disrespectful of this body. If we review these applications and we have comments, you need to respond to the comments, or you'll just never be approved, or we'll deny. So either be responsive or don't come. Any other comments?
Well, what I saw was that he had reduced the rear attic by 3 feet in height at the ridge.
The rear. I didn't see that.
And
Is it dimensioned?
yeah. Prior to that, I guess the ridge height had been about 8.2 feet above the attic floor, or 8 feet above the attic floor, and it was almost like, or no, as long as you're just below the 8 feet, it doesn't count. So he reduced it 3 feet. So it's like
At
really
the rear.
At the rear, yeah. So it's just, say, a storage space.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a usable room.
Right.
And that's at the high point of the attic at the rear. So I think that's what he was doing to attempt to address the concerns of the height of the building at the rear. And honestly, when I look at the building now, I know we've been through a lot of iterations. He has set back the dormer, the attic dormer, at least I think 10 feet or so, 13 feet from the street wall, so it won't be as visible. He's kept the same frontage
If that's true.
as the attached home, and he has to raise the attic somewhat, in order to give enough headroom to have a vertical enlargement up there. So considering the fact that it's a difficult situation and that it's an attached home, semi-attached, that I think I don't have any problem with this.
I would like the architect to come, so the architect can describe the project, so that we don't have to do this. Because reviewing the drawings, looking for the mysterious change. It's like, where's Waldo? I mean, it's just, it's, for one, it's not right to ask us to do this. If you're making an argument that this is better, make an argument. I mean, don't play this game with us, really. So I'm not anywhere close to there, but I would like the architect to present the project and explain why they can't make additional modifications, because the rear yard is going to be filled by a tall addition that will overwhelm. The rear yard photographs show that the rear yard will be overwhelmed by this tall extension. Any other comments?
Item number 19, 203 14 BZ, 18 West 8th Street, Manhattan, PCE.
Okay, this one, I don't think I had any other comments. Plans show, we talked about the 14'6" dimension that's in the R6, and the statement of fact states that this is a split lot, but they also, and therefore wouldn't be subject to the R6 regulations because more is in the C45, but they actually do need to state and support with a deed or something that this is a pre-61 zoning lot. Simple enough, could do it by tomorrow easily.
And the statement of facts also needs to be revised to state this is a legalization because the gym is already operating. Any other comment?
I just asked him about that easement, the rear exit easement, and they gave us sort of the egress plan for the facility, but he didn't answer whether or not they in any way interfere with that easement. So just to put it on the record that they don't.
Item number 20, 24614BZ, 210 Jerulman Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, that one, they did submit the sound attenuation details, so I think we're good with this.
Okay, thank you. Oh, okay, sorry. You want me to call the next four together, or?
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay. Items number 21, 22, 23, and 24, 28514BZ, 28814BZ, 29714BZ through 30014A, and 30714BZ, 30814BZ, and 31214BZ. These are Staten Island projects for the HBD. Build it back.
There were, I had a lot of coordination comments between all the different parts of the submission, but I believe that they responded in terms of coordination to show the write-up and the zoning calculation sheet and the drawings all say the same thing, ask for the same waivers. That was important. But I did have some questions that weren't answered at the last hearing about some of these. With respect to 28514BZ, that's 84 McLaughlin Street, the question was that there is an adjacent house that's built forward of this one and forward of the widening line. And the measurement for this house is a 20-foot front yard. I'm wondering whether the house could be pulled forward to increase the rear yard. That's only 17 foot 10 inches. That was one. It says, also, I hope they picked up these changes. The text said that there was no front yard waiver required, but the BSA zoning sheet shows there's an 18-foot front yard required because of the parking underneath. And only 14 is provided. The text also said no rear yard waiver is required, but the zoning sheet says there's only 13 provided, and the drawing shows 17 foot 10. So needs to coordinate that. With respect to 288-14 BZ 131 Cedar Grove, there was a question before. The existing building has a shallow front yard, and the proposed has an 18-foot one as required, but only a 20-foot rear yard. The neighbors have a deep rear yard, so I'm wondering whether the building could be pulled forward to increase the rear yard. And with respect to 30714 BZ 540 Hunter Avenue, there was a question in the earlier hearing about the fact that this seems to be one house in the middle of a swamp now, and there isn't anything adjacent to it. So what I wanted to know was whether there are plans for building out this neighborhood, or if this is just a one standalone. My fears about recreating the lower 9th Ward in New York City. Then, let's see. And then with respect to 312-14 BZ 65 Hempstead Avenue, again, the building sits very far back on the lot. Can it be brought forward to increase the rear yard depth from 14 foot 5? Then I note that the neighbor is built close to the street line. With some of these, I'm aware that a GCL waiver would be needed in order for them to be pulled back a lot, or sufficiently, say. And in future, I'd ask that if that would
improve the siting of the building on the lot, that these should be filed in concert with a GCL waiver. These get approved very quickly here. It's not a long time waiting for DOT to respond. They are very efficient. And I note that in at least one of these that would have required a GCL waiver, we would have had the DOT response a month ago. So,
Fire department response.
I'm sorry, fire department response.
GCL 35 is.
No, we would have needed DOT because it's building in the bed of a map street.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We would have needed DOT. So,
You're correct, sorry.
and so please submit those whenever you think that you might prefer to have a large rear yard, or, that's preferred, obviously, and if it's consistent with urban character to have the building pulled forward, then the GCL waiver should always accompany these. Anybody else?
Okay, new cases. Item number 1, 18614BZ, 5163 Bond Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, this is an application for a variance for a very large hotel building in Brooklyn. The requested difference is 2.7 FAR from 6 FAR commercial. They want an 8.7 FAR. The hardship is admittedly very significant. 70% of the site, or at least that's how it's described, is over a subway, mezzanine, and tunnel. But otherwise, the bearing capacity of the soil is apparently very good. The premiums are for cantilevering the structure, drilled piles, et cetera, monitoring, vibration isolation, and so on. But I do have comments about the application. The first is that no EAS was provided. I mean, there was an EAS checklist, but when you check something, now you're supposed to actually go and investigate the thing you check. So this is a proposal for an increase in 2.7 FAR, so the impacts could be substantial. And not only that, when it's a variance, it's not the difference between the 2.7, the 6 and the 8.7, it's the difference between a vacant lot and the 8.7. So you could really have some significant impacts here. The reason for that is because the assumption is you would build nothing on this site if you didn't have the variance. The statement of facts needs to go through all of the applicable zoning regulations with respect to height, setback, rear yards, lot coverage, and so on. And so should the drawings. We didn't get any zoning drawings to show compliance with all of those things. I'm particularly concerned about the proposed plan because I don't think it complies with rear yard regulations. The architect should check section 33, 292, and 293, which has special rear and side yard requirements when a building is adjacent to a residence district, which this is, because even though there's that little strip that's in the residence district that is now taken over by the commercial district because of the split lot rules, it's treated as if it's a commercial zone, that the commercial district boundary line moves over and now it's adjacent to a residential zoning lot. The drawing should also provide a chart showing the floor area for each use in each scenario, because it's not clear how much floor area there's being used for, say, reception purposes, kitchen, all of that. It's not shown anywhere on the drawings. I find out about it from reading the financial analysis. So they got that information kind of on the side. We need the information too, and that's gross information. We need floor area. And also, we need a breakdown of the guest room sizes and the chart indicating whether it's a king, queen, or a suite, so that we can compare the kinds of rooms that are being provided in all of the different scenaria. The photo streetscape, which we are asking for regularly now, was quite a strange thing because it decided to cut off the top of all the tall buildings. So it dashes the tall part of the building. How do you make an argument that your building is in character if you've removed the part that is similar to your building. I don't get that. So go back and do the streetscape. Cameras don't just face this way, they go up. So, the urban cartographic study makes many assertions about the subterranean conditions on other lots in the area, but provides no supporting materials. There's just a map where somehow the subway is shown underneath, and we don't know where that information is from. There's also the engineering drawing that's provided by the engineer does the same thing. It's just sort of this simple map that has, or plan, that has some colors, and it says 14 feet is the depth to the tunnel over here, but then there's all this over here, and it doesn't say anything about where that is. We're used to receiving engineering drawings where there is data on the entire drawing in elevations telling us what the depth is in every location. That way we can really understand where there can be a cellar or a basement. At the moment, we have not enough information for that. And also in terms of urban cartographics, we need the data to come in order to support their claim that those other sites only have smaller percentages of subway coverage. I note that sites 3 and 4 in the study are distinguished in part because they are affordable housing projects. I'm not understanding that distinction. A hardship is a hardship in development, and if the sites were burdened by similar structural difficulties as this site, they would have needed variances to develop. Even affordable housing projects have to break even or support themselves. So I don't understand how those are excluded. Either it's a hardship or it's not a hardship, because the premise is always, if it's such a terrible hardship, nothing would be built here. Another question is, in terms of offsetting of the costs, rather than increasing the floor area by variance, could development rights be purchased from adjoining properties here to do this, at least to offset the costs of the tunnel structure? It seems as if there's a lot of opportunity still in this neighborhood, especially, it seems like there's opportunity. For instance, we also have the authority to waive zoning lot boundaries, so arguably you could buy development rights from an adjoining property and move them across district boundaries, which therefore wouldn't require a floor area increase the same way. The engineering study, I already spoke about, needs to make clear the exact locations of the usable depth. The diagram's too schematic. And it should indicate where the major foundation structure, which was a term that was used in the engineering letter, can be placed, and whether there's a place where there could be a basement instead of a cellar. I just note that it's the first time I've read about a hardship or absence of a hardship being tied to the Pleistocene epoch. And I wanted to note that, because normally we only go as far back as the Lenape Indians. In this statement, let's see, explain in the statement that the proposed hotel will be founded on a combination of mat foundation bearing directly on the subway tunnel. I'm confused about that because an earlier statement says it's cantilevering over it. I didn't think anyone's allowed to bear on a subway tunnel. That's a little frightening. With respect to the premium costs, I have questions about some of them. Why is there a $212,000 cost for elevators, and why is site protection higher here at $203,000? And is it really $2 million to build an exit stair for the MTA? I mean, maybe it is, but it sounds like a lot of money for a staircase, just an emergency exit stair. We need renderings of the proposed buildings to understand its impact on neighborhood character. The neighborhood character discussion in the statement of facts is not supported by a map or aerial photo that locates the larger buildings in the area. It just says there's tall ones here and there, but it doesn't tell us where they are. It doesn't show us where they are. And with respect to the financials, I'll just speak very briefly on that. It needs to be corrected to show that the unencumbered also has an event space on the second floor, and I'm wondering whether there was a mistake in the analysis. I just think it's a mistake on the text, and I think it was picked up. But I also don't understand how the event space income has been included in this. It's a whole floor of event space, and it seems like the usual factor for food has been figured in here as opposed to rental of catering halls and all of that. And as I asked for in one of the other hearings, I'd like to understand the backup for all the assumptions in the soft cost and the hotel income costs. So when it's assumed to be X dollars a square foot, where does that assumption come from? What's the industry standard that it's coming from, so that we can know that it's not just, sounds good. Charlie Brown.
Okay, I had a few questions to the financials. I felt that these financials didn't necessarily reflect the minimum variance. And I think that they're... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we just couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. I think that there could be a better way to reap income from the floor area that you actually have here, to the extent that you might actually be able to shave off the floor. So with respect to the retail rents, I felt that the comps that they showed photos of the comps, were all inferior spaces, and that accounted for $100 per square foot, could possibly go higher. And I felt that if you look at the plans and you look, there's a 3-story ballroom, I would assume there is in this, and I think that that's not a very efficient use of the space, because in that space you could fit 8 hotel rooms per floor. So you're losing income from 24 hotel rooms that would be occupied in excess of 85% of the time for event space that might not be used that often. So I think that they should rethink that. They already have a lot of event space on the second floor, so I'm not sure it's really necessary. And then as to the comparable hotels that were used in developing the rate, not all of those hotels have extensive event space like that. And so I really think that you can actually add the rooms in, take out the event space, and not even adjust the average daily rate downwards, and hardly adjust the income, because the comparables are not showing event space that would not also be here. I think that I looked at the Smith travel report, and it stops in February 2014, so they really only have January 2014 and February 14th, and you have to figure out what the trend in occupancy would be for the rest of the year. And so I just did a little calculation for myself showing the growth in occupancy from January 2013, February 2013 to January 2014 and February 2014. And there's about a 2% increase in occupancy rate. And so I just took that 2% increase, applied it to the overall average occupancy rate for 2013, and I would get somewhere in excess of 86%. 88%. And so when you look at their analysis, and they're showing the stabilized year for 2018, the occupancy rate is only 85%. They need to explain why they're projecting such a low increase in occupancy. Maybe there is new stock coming online in the next few years, but they really have to discuss that. Otherwise, it doesn't really make that much sense. It seems a little too conservative. So those are generally my comments.
Great, thanks. Anything else?
I agree with everything that's been said. I just felt that there wasn't enough information to really understand what this building is, especially I did not understand the foundation system. I agree there was sort of an inconsistency in saying we're cantilevering, yet we're also going to be bearing, and I'm not sure that you're permitted to bear on a subway tunnel. It wasn't clear if they were designing to, I guess, MTA sort of standard for being able to span the subway tunnel. On some of the drawings, they leave out, I think, the west tunnel that I guess is adjacent to the east tunnel. So they talk about 70% or so of their property being encumbered by the tunnels, but all the drawings don't show necessarily where those tunnels are. And so I need some more information about that. Also, in the EAS checklists, a lot of things just aren't checked. which would apply to the project. So even if we didn't get an EAS sort of backup on the checklist, there's something, they got to go back over the checklist and make sure that they've covered everything. And I think some things are just incorrect. So I just thought that we just needed a lot more information, and it was not a full submission.
And I just wanted to add, there was a submission from a neighbor who was very concerned about the impact of the hotel on their lives, residential living location, and I'm concerned with respect to that the event space is relying on those terraces that are set back on the second floor, because they really will be, to the best of my understanding, looking over into residential uses, and famously, hotels are disliked very much in residential neighborhoods because of the exterior party space. Something will have to be done about those in order to make this viable in the neighborhood. Maybe there won't be a use of that exterior space, that becomes a roof, but again, I'm concerned that those need to be more than 20 feet deep. I think they actually, some of them need to be 30. They need to look at that. Anything else?
Okay, yes, thank you. I had also questioned why they couldn't purchase development rights similar to the other properties they discussed in the area study. And regarding some of the sites in the area study, none of them were included in the comps, and especially like 71 Smith and 160 Schermerhorn, which they said were very similar to this site. I was wondering if they could give us comps for that land value. Regarding the MTA easement, they were kind of very vague in terms of what's required by the easement, and it's my understanding that the MTA structure is designed for vertical loading, but it has to be uniform loading, and which requires them to put these mats in, these isolation slabs, but it can't take any lateral loading. So if they could give us information about what the existing MTA structure is designed for, they should give us also, I guess someone mentioned, the actual sections of the MTA structure, plans and sections of the structure below the surface. According to their engineer, the AOR, the azurite excavation would be sited on the glacial outwash, but their calculations for the hardship have it, which is at 20 feet below grade, but their calculations of the hardship has the excavation only going down to 14 feet below grade, so I think they underestimated the azurite costs. They really didn't give us any detailed analysis of the hardship. No unit costs. They gave us some quantities, but they should give us a general foundation plan and show how these quantities play in, and give us an estimate of what's involved and how the costs were derived in terms of piles, where the different mat slabs are, the concrete walls. They were kind of silent on the adjacent conditions in terms of the dimensions of all the yards surrounding the site, distance to windows. And similar to what you were saying, some of the neighbors, one of their main bones of contention was that the entrance was going to be on Bond Street. And I go, no, going to the site, it's kind of like a very roundabout way to get to Bond Street, and Schermerhorn is like a main thoroughfare. I was wondering, why didn't they put the entrance on Schermerhorn? And similarly, the EAS was very vague. I didn't even see a phase 1. So I think there's a lot of work to do. One other thing, it's in the special Brooklyn downtown zoning, which they didn't address at all.
Well, there's no zoning analysis of any kind, so, right. And for the benefit of the applicant who may not be familiar with our engineering skills, Commissioner Montanez can review all the engineering drawings, so don't be shy and show us like easy ones to understand for lay people. Commissioner Montanez is an engineer and will review them down to the she'll review the boring logs, so, if needed. Okay, thanks.
Item number 2, 23814BZ, 98 to 100 Franklin Street, Manhattan.
Okay, this site, I'm actually very familiar with this site, and it's this funny little bow tie triangle that has not been developed for good reason because it is such an odd site. It's only split into two little pieces. It's only 4,100 square feet. The proposal is for two buildings with residential and ground floor retail. And in terms of hardships, in addition to those two funny little triangles, which force you to build two separate buildings because there's, I think it touches by 3 inches.
No, it's less than that. It's 5/100ths of an inch.
Oh, there you go.
It's like less than a point.
Right. So it's kind of whack. So you are forced to build two buildings with full everything duplicated. In addition to that, it is within 4 feet of the subway tunnel, so it requires all kinds of additional structural pursuits or structural efforts to make this building happen. You know, I don't really have an issue with them proving hardship, and their request doesn't include floor area, so it's a surprisingly modest request given the difficulty of the site. But I still think that there is the materials are incomplete. For instance, there isn't any backup material to support the contention that this property is unique in form and relationship to the subway tunnel. We may know that intuitively because how many bow tie sites have you seen? But we don't know about its relationship to the subway tunnel compared to the other sites. There was attached to the financial analysis an attachment A that had to do with lot size versus subway tunnel frontage, but there's no analysis provided, and I'm not sure that the financials is the place where that attachment should occur. It should occur as part of the statement of facts where there's an analysis being made to support the unique condition finding. There's this very strange 5-foot side yard that I'm not understanding the history of it, and there's a part that's not part of it is this, I don't know if it's 10 feet wide or something like that, between the building and the other building. There's this kind of strange nowhere land. Is that open area not part of the property? Is there an easement on that 5-foot portion that why it needs to stay open? It says it's shared by other buildings on the block. What does that mean? I don't understand any of that. It wasn't explained at all. And we do need to understand that. And by the way, that could certainly go towards part of the uniqueness that you can't build fully on your lot because of this existing easement that dates back to the 19th century or something. But I do know there is, you can't use the fact of being in a historic district and the related facade costs in the hardship analysis. And I say that in particular because given this Tribeca location, any upscale facade would have been standard to appeal to the market. So I doubt that the design would have been much different if it were in a historic, we're not in a historic district. Then I'm wondering why are there no premium costs discussed in terms of duplicating the HVAC systems and the stairs? There's a duplication of utilities that was considered and an elevator, but I mean, everything has to be duplicated, heating, everything. So I'm not sure why that wasn't included. There also isn't much mention about these tiny floor plates and the awkward configuration that they result in the complying development and how that affects value. It would seem to me that In terms of the financials, you could argue that on the complying development, there's such strange units that that would not be appealing in the market, and I don't think that there was enough of a discount for configuration or shape or whatever it is there. I note that on the complying drawings, it's zoning chart. It says that it complies with the street wall regulations, but no complying building can comply with the street wall regulations if it also complies with the lot coverage regulations. So it has an outer court, and even there was a submission, which I'm not really sure what it was for because it's just sort of randomly flying around in the paperwork, but there was a submission of another version where instead of an outer court, there was the section of the one triangle cut off to create some open space. And again, there should be a discussion about a complying building not being viable because the floor plates are so tiny, hard to market. So with respect to that random site plan, because it was just flying around there, I have no idea why it was submitted. It doesn't appear in the statement of facts, nothing. We're supposed to figure out what that's for. And similarly, Sanborn maps were provided without indicating where the site is, so you have to wander around looking for the historical location of the site prior to Avenue of Americas being cut through there. In terms of the financial hardships, there is a September 22nd and December 17th submission concerning costs related to foundations, MTA tunnel monitoring, et cetera, totaling $2.185 million. There is another random page floating around concerning costs for elevator, shear wall, core, and facade that's not explained by the consultant and not included anywhere. I don't know if it's included. I don't know what that is, and that's totaling $1.25. With respect to land values, and I'll just speak about the financials a little bit, none of the sites used are in the neighborhood or comparable to this site. All but one are east of Bowery. And I'm also, with respect to them, not understanding the discounts. This site is 4,000 square feet, yet a 23,000 square foot site is discounted by 10%. I don't understand that. And a location on Elizabeth Street is considered directly comparable. No discount given. With respect to the residential condo analysis, the unit mix in the as of right has 2 bedrooms with 1 or 2 baths and 1 studio. That's not comparable to the proposed that has 2 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and 3.5 baths, including 2 duplexes. So, I mean, if you're really going to compare these properly, at least the units have to be similar. And then I always have an issue with these kinds of bonuses and discounts because they seem so arbitrary to me. In the comps, why are bonuses applies to size when sizes are comparable to the proposed? I don't get that. The proposed range from 1,400 to 3,600 square feet, depending on how many you count. That's what the comparables have. And where do the outdoor spaces fit in for the duplexes? How is this calculated into value? And the stacking diagram has no support for the unit prices. How do we get to a little bit more for each floor? One of them I noticed, you go up a floor, it's $10 more. That's all, or that much, or why is it $10 more? Is there some kind of standard that's applied to increase as you go up by floor? And then with respect to the construction cost estimates, they're not attributed to any source, but I'm taking a guess based on some other materials that are provided by DDG Development, that they are provided by DDG, who's the applicant. It's actually the owners. You can't have cost estimates prepared by the owner of the property. It has to be an arm's length analysis. Also, how did it?
And also, how do those cost estimates tie into the cost of the premiums described by RA consultants? And then I note there's a DEP letter in January with respect to the RAP and the CHASP that gives additional requests about, additional instructions, anyway.
Your financial comments were, of course, very thorough, and I only had one that I can even add to it. And that had to do with the site value, which was based on vacant land sales. And if you look at the photos that they later submitted, 2 of the sites had buildings on them. One of the sites, the building, I believe, has been demolished. The other site, which is comp number 3, still has a 4-story garage on it in the photo, and also the Department of Finance tentative assessment roll still has that 4-story building on the site and generating income. So if that building is still there, it might not necessarily be a land sale in the immediate future. Maybe down the road they were planning on developing it. So they need to take that out, because that is the highest value sale and it's skewing everything upwards. If they took that out, the site value would definitely drop pretty precipitously.
The RA consultants, I think, were defining the below-grade hardship, and I thought their analysis was pretty good and thorough with unit costs and quantities. And the DDG costs were explaining the above-grade hardship. So, I have to admit that the site has hardship. The one thing I did have a little question about was they're using the quality housing design guidelines, but they're not providing any recreation amenity, common recreation amenity. And all of their outdoor space is private. And I realize that it might be 2 buildings, but I questioned that fact.
And there may not be any way of providing that shared by all of the tenants in such a tiny
Well,
site,
perhaps in part of the cellar.
Or maybe they need a waiver. If they need a waiver, they have to ask for a waiver on that, right? Okay.
Everything I needed to say has been said.
Great. Thank you.
Item number 3, 249-14BZ, 200 Baychester Avenue, the Bronx. It's a PCE.
Something like this range. Okay, I swear I wrote stuff on this and it's not here. Anyway, I didn't have any particular comments
It's in a
on it.
mall. It doesn't
Yeah.
seem to need sound attenuation. I didn't have any
Right.
comments.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait, can I just,
Uh-huh.
if they're in operation and they have the massage licenses, they should provide them.
Okay.
That's all.
I'm going to recommend that we take this one first on our
Yes.
afternoon calendar. Yeah, tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This concludes the executive session for February 9, 2015.
Thank you.